It's not about NJMEP. This is about an industry that's critical to our state. I'm going to show you two slides. I'm not a big PowerPoint guy, but this is taken from a lot of the details, most of it from the New Jersey DOL. What you see is they have manufacturing. They list out the companies and the amount of employees, etc. I've never understood why the DOL takes out life sciences, because if you're in that industry and making, you're a manufacturer. So we actually roll it back in. I also included up there the transportation and logistics area in New Jersey. Why? Because that's critical to what we call the supply chain. I didn't include the engineering and tech and STEM sides that also support the industry. So when people tell me that manufacturing is dead and they show me pictures of GM and Ford plants that are closed, I don't listen to them. Because you know what? They're gone. I can't do anything about that. But for our numbers, what we have is, by our database, and NJMEP's been around about 21 years, we have 10,552 manufacturing companies. That's taken pure from NAICS codes. We didn't make up the number's there. So, and what we did was we used an average, which is National Association of Manufacturing says that manufacturing companies in New Jersey have an average of 34 people. So if we just do that, we have almost 360,000 direct employees. That's fairly substantial. I had 72 at my engineering company, and that was too much. I loved them dearly, but they kept wanting to get paid every 2 weeks, and that was difficult. Last night I was watching TV. I was watching something, and yeah, forgive me, I'm an engineer. I was watching How It Works. And there was a bunch of ads. One was for New York State, come to New York State, manufacture in New York State. There's another one for Pennsylvania, another one for Michigan. The one that really caught my ear, though, was the one that was talking about energy, and it was ExxonMobil. Great commercial. And it says in the energy industry, every one energy job adds 2 more to the economy. Manufacturing, it's 4 to 1. So if you're thinking about those 360,000 jobs in New Jersey, that's about 1.8 million jobs. I think that's fairly important to our economy. Secondly, I broke these charts down by district because I've talked to a lot of our elected officials, and they all want to hear, they all want to talk to you, they all want to engage. But a lot of them tell me they have no manufacturing in their district. So by putting this chart together, we dispel that, because every district has a significant amount of manufacturing. Obviously, there's more than others, but the reality is this is the impact. So to me, that's the critical aspect of what we're trying to do today. But at the end of the day, if we don't start the communications and all we do is complain, nothing's going to change. And now is the time to change. Now is the time when there's a resurgence of conversation about manufacturing and STEM. We're looking at it in a different light. We hear it from our president, but we also heard it from President Obama, who's very supportive of manufacturing. And the reality is, I'm not too worried about reshoring jobs. I'm not against it. But we got 10,552 people that stayed. And I'm worried about them and how we can help them. So, at the end of the day, we need to have discussion. What concerns me about our world at this point in time is that there is no discussion or discourse anymore. If we disagree politically or anywhere else, what we do is we denigrate that person that disagrees with us. We put them down, we ask them to resign, we don't talk. And that scares me, because that's what happens across the board with things. The other day I told a story that I had read in the online, that these 2 young 14, 15-year-olds had come across, a car crash, and they went down a hill and they helped the woman and her baby out of the car, and they saved their lives before the car burst into flames. Now, I've never put a comment on any article, but I thought to myself, this has got to be one where everybody's positive. I scroll down and I look at the comments. The first comment is, she was probably driving too fast. There was other comments, I wonder if the child was in a proper car seat. Geez, holy crap, there's a 14 and 15-year-old kids that actually went into it and saved the lives of 2 people. But that's not the way we deal. I also say that whenever you guys get books for birthdays and Christmas and their history or biographies, thank you, because they go to the AAUW book sales eventually, and I buy them. And I read them. That's how I go in $5, I can get a bag of books. And I actually lost the book that it's still down in Trenton, I forgot it. But this is the similar book than the one that I reread a year ago. It's called Man of the House, and it's about Tip O'Neill. He was the former Speaker of the House during Reagan years. And they didn't agree a lot in politics. And they fought battles back and forth. But they actually sat down and figured out how to govern. We don't do that anymore. So we need to start a conversation for manufacturing in New Jersey to create that back and forth. And if we don't, no one in this room succeeded today. Lastly, before we get into the program, I want to leave you with a couple of takeaways, what I'd love to get back from you. Number one, we're rookies at this event, so we're just learning. In fact, we made some changes already from Wednesday of things that we tried and didn't necessarily work perfectly. So if you see something, or if you can't reach somebody or remember who to talk to, please reach back out to me or any one of our team and ask a question or make a suggestion about how we can improve this event. We're going to be back next year doing it, so we need your support. The second thing is to the manufacturers and STEM companies is you need to stand up and you need to be engaged. If you keep your head down, nothing will change. And I know it's tough to stick your head up, but we need you to be involved. How can that be? You can be in our advisory board, you can help us with programs like Manufacturing Day, you can run tours, facility tours for young people, for elected officials, and we'd love to hear from you. And the last thing is to our elected officials is that we're going to try to start a manufacturing caucus. There was one a few years ago, and it slowly disappeared, but we need it back because we need the give and take. We need to be able to speak to people that make decisions about us. I think we believe that when somebody gets elected, there's some sort of Vulcan mind meld that they are automatically, everything they need to know is downloaded. So they know everything about pensions, everything about healthcare, everything about manufacturing. That's not true. These are smart people, but they don't know. Heck, I spoke to a very intelligent reporter this morning, and he was stunned to find that we have 10,552 companies. He's been in New Jersey a long time and, been to a lot of companies. I'm not sure you knew that. So at the end of the day, what we need to do is we need to come together and make a difference. And yeah, there'll be some arguments, but hopefully there'll be some end results as well. So that's why we're here. I will say that I got some grief by a few people because I have my NJMEP, but I also have this little pin below it. That's for National Distinguished Eagle. In the history of Boy Scouts, there's only been 2,000 of them. There's been 2.2 million Eagle Scouts. I'm wearing it today because over 40 years ago today, this is when my dad passed away, and he was very supportive of me becoming an Eagle Scout. I think it was in that time more important to him. So stop giving me grief. Let me wear the damn pin. So we've tried to bring a lot of groups together. And if you were at the event down in South Jersey, we work with NJBIA, who also works with us on our Manufacturing Day program. Today we brought in CIA as our MC and Tony Russo. And the best thing I can tell you about Tony, he's an engineer. Now, he went to the dark side known as politics, but he's still a degreed engineer, so is that right? We're okay. CIA&J is also a good partner of ours. They work with us in Manufacturing Day and our Manufacturing Cares program, which does scholarships, which does a food drive, and a variety of other things. It's a way to show that the industry cares more about everything that happens in New Jersey. And without CIA&J's support and their manufacturing roundtables, there'd be less positive going on in this state. Tony, don't steal my book.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, John. Before I get started, I thought when he said, Tony went to the dark side, he failed to tell everybody that I worked 4 years at the DEP. So by show of hands, how many manufacturers are fans of the DEP, right? Not one. So, but anyway, before I'm happy to be the MC today, and we'll make sure that we stay on schedule and hit all the points that we need to. I want to acknowledge a few people in the audience. My colleague Paul Boudreau, who runs the Morris County Chamber. I've learned a lot from Paul. I've known him for many years, so thank you, Paul. I also want to acknowledge champions of business. There are a few legislators here. Senator Bucco, if you could stand up, Senator Bucco. Senator Bucco runs and operates Baker Titan Adhesive, so he is a manufacturer. And I can tell you, I've been doing the political side for 17 years, and he and his son, Assemblyman Anthony Bucco Jr., is also here. And I believe Assemblyman Carroll, too, is here, so thank you for your service. As John said, the Commerce and Industry Association represents about 900 different companies. And one of the things that I've learned in my 4 years here is just how diverse the commerce can be in New Jersey. We represent banks, accountants, colleges and universities, utilities, but we also have many manufacturers. And that'll always be dear to my heart, because not only because I'm the engineer, but I also worked at DEP, but I had the opportunity to represent chemical companies in Trenton. And I'll tell you why manufacturers are important to this economy. It was one day when we were at the State House, we were arguing a tax, and a chemical company executive pulls me aside, and the meeting didn't go well, and he said, Tony, do the lawmakers in New Jersey really appreciate what we do for the state? And I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, when New Jersey makes something, and it doesn't matter what they make, it could be chemicals, pharmaceuticals, consumer products, anything, it generates wealth. And when wealth is generated, that wealth comes back to the state. And that could be put back into investment, jobs. And I look at you as not only manufacturers, but employers that provide a quality of life to your employees. So I think you should all be commended. And I think that's the takeaway today is, again, you have a very passionate leader in John Kennedy and his team. As far as pushing the envelope down in Trenton, getting the attention. I can tell you because I'm there all the time, and I'm sure the legislators can say the same thing. But one thing that businesses lack, and I'm not afraid to say it, is passion sometimes. And that passion needs to be there when you see these controversial issues coming up. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to introduce our first speaker, Carol Thomas. I'm not sure where she is. Oh, there she is. Carol is the director of the Manufacturing Extension Program. She oversees 400 MEPs throughout the country, and also the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Before that, she also worked for the Small Business Administration. She also held various positions within MEP, and previous business owner, and a graduate of Drexel and Johns Hopkins. So please welcome Carol. Carol's going to give the national year of manufacturing.
Thank you, Tony, for that wonderful introduction. Unfortunately, there isn't an MEP in the Virgin Islands yet, so we're going to figure out how to do that. I want to start off this morning by, first of all, thanking you all for coming out and not being afraid of a little rain. The last time I was here in New Jersey, it rained so hard that they had to call it an emergency. It was a state of emergency in New Jersey because it rained so hard. So I don't know if it's me or what's happening here, but that's what happens every time I come to New Jersey. I also want to thank the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Partnership, our partner with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, for inviting me to speak at this New Jersey State of the State Manufacturing Summit. I think it's very important that we're all gathered here, and this is a great idea. Thanks a lot, John, and his wonderful group of folks at NJMEP. I'd also like to thank the New Jersey Business Industry Association, the Commerce and Industry Association of New Jersey, and the Morris County Chamber of Commerce for coming together to help put on this fantastic event. I just have 15 minutes to talk, so I'm just going to give a very brief overview of what manufacturing in the United States looks like now, and something for you all as manufacturers to consider. The policies do impact what happens in manufacturing, what happens in everything. And so what we are experiencing now, I contend, is impact of unanticipated consequences of policies that weren't quite coordinated and focused on manufacturing. Looking at changes in the dynamism in manufacturing between 1992 and 2014, equal number of manufacturers are contracting and expanding. And the number of manufacturing firms opening versus closing is also stagnant. However, there's a lot of good things that are happening. And what's happening now is is a leading indicator of what's going to be happening in manufacturing, because there's a lot of very high optimism, consumer and business optimism. And there's also been, in the last 6 months, just the last 6 months, a straight increase in manufacturing output. The decline of U.S. manufacturing competitiveness has, in some parts that had been happening before, just very recently, had a lot to do with what the public focus, the policies were. And so it does make a difference when they hear directly from manufacturers to help with these policies in manufacturing. Trade, technology, and globalization have changed manufacturing in profound ways. And I use trade, technology, and globalization. You'll hear a lot of people will say that it's either trade or it's globalization, and in some cases technology. But I contend it's all three that have made the difference in manufacturing. This is not only changing the way that products are produced and what is produced, but it's changing how manufacturers operate and changing the jobs and the skills required now and in the future. A consequence of the end of the vertically integrated corporation has been the disintegration of the regional manufacturing ecosystems, which supported long-term supplier relationships and investments in long-tenured employees. The landscape of manufacturing has changed and continues to change. It is no longer a world of large integrated manufacturing companies like it started out with the Ford Motor Company back in those days, but more now consisting of more of a smaller network, more focused and more agile companies that form the basis of our manufacturing base. For instance, small manufacturers now represent an increasing share of all manufacturing establishments. Over 82% of all manufacturing establishments have less than 50 employees. That's a very important number to note, especially if you have more employees and have a supply chain. It's critical to note that a huge amount of manufacturers are less than 50 employees. At the national level, policymakers in the executive and legislative branches are recognizing the importance of the manufacturing sector and have been for a while. And not just because of its multiplier effect, as John was talking about earlier, on local economies, or its importance to our defense industrial base, or its contribution to exports, but critically to its centrality to our national innovation ecosystem. When large companies talk about reshoring, they mention the problem of finding high-quality suppliers, always. A major consequence of dismantling the vertically integrated corporations and the globalization of production is the thinning out of our domestic supply chain. Smaller manufacturers have a host of challenges with cost reduction being the biggest. It's always with the OEMs looking to squeeze the smaller guys to get better profits out. However, in the last few years, and I'm glad to see a panel about workforce, and getting good quality, skilled employees now come to a huge problem for a lot of manufacturers who want to grow. Since 2016, employee recruitment has shot up, and the onset of Industry 4.0, or manufacturing's revolution, has also made the need for new technology grow. The manufacturing sector accounts for over 2/3 of our R&D investments, our tech employment, and our patents. We pride ourselves on our creative and entrepreneurial innovative activity, but what is now recognized is that without a strong manufacturing sector, we cannot maintain our innovation capabilities. Design it here and build it elsewhere is not a sustainable strategy. There is a widespread bipartisan federal and state recognition that in order to become more competitive, we need a more highly trained and skilled workforce. Reports issued by corporate-led entities such as the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, co-chaired by the president of the Dow Corporation and the president of MIT, have all emphasized that need to address the shortfall in skills if we are to bring back manufacturing. And one of the things that we are doing at headquarters, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, for the MEP program, is we're looking at credentials out there, all of the credentials for workers in manufacturing, and we're gauging which ones are appropriate for this type of skill, which ones have this type of value, and where there's gaps. And so we hope to get that report out very soon. Deloitte's Global Manufacturing Competitiveness Report, this which came out last year, listed that finding talented and skilled employees as one of the top 3 items that will make or break having the U.S. regain the title as the #1 global competitive nation in the world. Very important to note that. I hope you all are familiar with the NJMEP. If you're not, I'm glad you came to learn a little bit more about it. This New Jersey MEP is part of a national public-private partnership. The NIST folks at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, we partner with the various different organizations in all 50 states of Puerto Rico. We work together and try not to get in the middle of their expertise with manufacturers and support them in what they are doing with the federal investment and also some connections with other parts of the federal government, other national laboratories, and other business type partnerships. This is done to address the strong issues that are happening with the smaller manufacturers and to help build the U.S. manufacturing base. The sole mission is to enhance the productivity and technological performance of U.S. manufacturers. This is the sole purpose of this program. So we're here for you like no one else is. Utilizing the public-private model allows small manufacturers to engage with a trusted advisor that can instantly connect them with their local manufacturing ecosystems, connect them with resources, provide expert information so that they can grow their businesses. As a former business owner, I know one of the most valuable things that I have is my time. And so what we try to do is so that you're not out searching to find information that can help you, we come to you to help you with your business. Last year, the 1,300 expert manufacturing advisors and 2,500 of their partners across the country worked with over 25,000 small and medium-sized manufacturers. The typical size of these companies that we work with range between 100 and 50, but we are also looking to do more with the below 50 number of employees. And also the typical project was between 80 and 120 hours. Recently, the W.E. Upjohn Institute came out with a study using the MEP National Network impact information. We have a third-party company that goes out for all 51 of our MEP centers across the country to talk to the manufacturers that they've helped and ask them what has been the change since you've gotten help with through the MEP program. And so this information that was collected was fed to the Upjohn Institute, and we used both a constrained and unconstrained model, meaning looking at if there's competition with these manufacturers or no competition, which more realistically is competition, to find out what is the return on investment from the federal funds that were put out there to be matched by the center. And with the unconstrained, we found that there were 575,000 jobs in the United States that would not have been created or retained without the services and activities of the MEP centers. That is sort of in a bubble. When we looked at the constrained, meaning using the competition that's out there with manufacturers, 142,000 jobs would not have been created without the MEP program. Because the MEP National Network works with the primarily small and medium-sized manufacturers, the focus much of their systems on working with suppliers, supply chains, are able to play a trusted intermediary role between the OEMs and their suppliers to help optimize productivity and maximize cost reduction without sharing proprietary information. Most, when you deal with a consultant, especially if you're a small manufacturer, and that consultant also works for the OEM, you fear that your proprietary information could go to the OEM. You can work with the MEP and not have this be a part of it. MEP centers partners work with them and their clients to develop and grow that skilled talent that they need. And so we will, our MEP centers will work with various different organizations, such as the organizations that have helped to put on this event, to help them find out ways that make sense to help to grow the skilled employees that you need. You as manufacturers here in New Jersey have an opportunity to influence policy by letting your voice be heard. As I said before, what better way of having policies made to help you, if not coming from you? I know that there's a panel on regulations, and I think that it's valuable to have clean air, of course, and safe working conditions. However, there has been some concerns that some of these regulations are not coordinated, are not based in reality of what actually happens out in a manufacturing firm. And so I've been working with a number of people, with the policy people with the Department of Commerce, on several different presidential memoranda to help find out from you where your pains are with regulations and permitting. And so we've put out a Federal Register notice to collect the information, and we've had it out. And even though today is the last day that you could actually go on and let us know what it is, I challenge you to continue to be heard, to go and talk to your elected officials and say, hey, these regulations or these things are not in line with helping businesses, manufacturers grow. They create barriers. Make yourself heard. Not just, make things, but make yourself heard. And so I'd like to wrap it up with something I said the last time I was here. There's some very special things happening here in New Jersey in terms of manufacturing. John noted that there's more than 10,000 manufacturers right here in New Jersey. If you add that up with the other 50 states, if there were 10,000 manufacturers in the other 50 states, you would see that that's many more than there actually are, which says that New Jersey has many more manufacturers than a lot of states. And that is going to help this state do very, very well, especially with what's happening in manufacturing 4.0, in industry 4.0, where there's new technologies coming out there and new ways of making things and new ways of connecting things that are being made. And so I challenge you again, like I did about almost a year and a half ago, to go out there, not only to make things happen, make what you're making, but connect with each other and connect with your legislators to let them know what you need so that we can help you do the best that you can. Thank you.
Okay, now to give us the state perspective, can everybody hear us in the back? Just want to make sure the mics are okay. Is Dr. Don Sebastian of the New Jersey Institute of Technology. He is the president and CEO of the New Jersey Innovation Institute, which is housed in NJIT, my alma mater. He's also held several positions within the university since 1995, and most importantly, he was the founding member of the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program. So please welcome Dr. Sebastian.
Thank you, everyone. My goodness, we don't have a slide on, sir. How does this work?
I think you can.
Okay. See, I didn't get here early enough to get the high sign. So first, let me all welcome you as members of the U.S. Manufacturing Founders Club. You may not know this, but U.S. manufacturing was born right here in New Jersey, and not by accident, but by design. Between rap sessions, Alexander Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, had a vision for America, and manufacturing was an important part of that vision. And there were two elements. Number one, he recognized that as a young nation, we needed to be able to provide for ourselves. We couldn't be dependent upon Europe to provide us manufactured goods. And although he said at that time that agriculture was likely to be the mainstay of our economy as far out as he could see, given the vastness of our arable lands, and that was just for the 13 colonies, he also recognized that manufacturing had a very unique role: productivity. He said that modern inventiveness, machinery, could increase the value per acre and per worker at a far greater rate than he ever could achieve by harnessing the natural resources of agriculture. That was pretty prescient, an important message to remember today. And so you may be able to see in the back pictures of the first press conference that he held with George Washington as they selected Paterson, New Jersey, to become the planned home for U.S. manufacturing. The Great Falls as a almost inexhaustible power source. They hired Pierre L'Enfant, who designed the U.S. Capitol, to plan and design Paterson, New Jersey as the epicenter, as ground zero in a good way for U.S. manufacturing. And it worked. And so we built some very important capabilities and very important brand names right here in New Jersey. We were able to take advantage of the iron mines right here in Morris County and Sussex County. to drive brand names like Colt, like Rogers Locomotive, the Union Pacific locomotive that was in the Golden Spike ceremony was made right here by Rogers in Paterson, New Jersey. Also went into components, it went into manufacturing equipment. In fact, the first probably growth was the mills. First for cotton, our own product from the South, and then later silk mills, right here in Paterson, New Jersey. And so Paterson became the silk city of the world. So not only was it producing the goods, but it was producing the machinery that produced the goods, but there are other industries as well. Modern brewing, right here in Newark, New Jersey, Valentine Ale. There's a picture that goes through the back. You can see what a spread they had on the Passaic River. The Hyatt family in Newark, New Jersey, really invented modern plastics. It was celluloid. It was derived from natural materials, but not only did they begin first in the lost pursuit of a synthetic billiard ball, but then later into tchotchkes. So the modern cheap plastics began, but more importantly, they invented the injection molding machine, which even today is the process technology by which we make advanced and precision synthetic materials molding. And an important element often overlooked is that the petrochemical industry began and flourished right here on the Hudson River. First in the processing of wood materials for dyes, then later starch and industrial chemicals, all of which set the tone then for what was to come. Because the real explosive growth came in the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s, when science confronted both products and processes. Everybody knows the story of Thomas Edison. Most don't know that long before the light bulb, he was also in downtown Newark manufacturing. 3 different locations producing his ticker tape machine, his first revenue-generating machine. Gave him the resources to go out and buy the bucolic Menlo Park setting, and the rest is history from there. But he spawned around him a number of competitors and collaborators who really were the basis of the future growth in electric power generation and distribution. Well, with that as a hub, it also surely attracted Alexander Graham Bell to move from Connecticut first to New York City to set up AT&T operations. But when he needed manufacturing, where did he go? Right here to Jersey, Western Electric in Harrison. And it wasn't long before Western Electric then brought Bell Labs from New York City across the river. And again, the rest is history. RCA, after World War I, looking where do we set up and build the radio broadcast and later television broadcast industry for America and for the world, right here in New Jersey. You get the message here. Now, I can go through every one of those icons. I do want to make one point, though, which is that on this side of the screen, my left, the chemical process industry, often overlooked as an important segment of manufacturing. As I mentioned before, we began with industrial chemicals set up across the river from Manhattan as a convenient location. But what happened in 1885? Something very interesting. Mr. Rockefeller decided that he needed a place to move Standard Oil. And he looked around and he found favorable tax policies for his corporation here in New Jersey. Who would have thunk? And so he plopped down the Standard Oil refinery in Bayway, Linden, New Jersey. And again, the rest is history. Even after divestiture, when they broke up Standard Oil, we had Standard Oil of New Jersey selling its products under the brand name SO, later Exxon, and Standard Oil Company of New York, Saucony, refining in South Jersey, in Paulsboro, Saucony Mobil, and again, look what happened. Back together again, Exxon Mobil, the largest refiner in the world, and what did that beget? Well, again, we can go on. It brought in pharmaceuticals, Merck right next door, and we became the medicine chest of the world. Modern plastics, synthetic plastics, with George Bakelin forming Bakelite as his product, and Bakelin Industries in Perth Amboy that then became Union Carbide, now Dow. Food products, personal products. Colgate actually is said to have had the first industrial R&D, which they annexed to their manufacturing plant in Jersey City. But somewhere along the way, we forgot the girl we brought to the dance. I think I began to see this in the 80s, and I would be sorry to say that New Jersey, to some extent, led the way in a national disaffection for manufacturing as the core of its economy, as we fell in love instead with the service sector. I think it's more like falling and becoming a junkie. We became addicted to the financial services industry. Perhaps we all thought we'd outgrown the need to get our hands dirty and to work hard. We had a perception that manufacturing was an insult to our environment and a tedious workplace. And so we'd all thought perhaps that we'd outgrown that. It was time now for clean professional environments, and with the toxic lure of riches in Wall Street, that seemed like a good place to go. And we all marched behind the beat of the drum of the service sector economy. And sadly, where has it brought us? Financial services has not been the backbone of our economy. And we saw what happened in 2008 by over-reliance on that. We looked at job counts in the service sector, and I'm afraid we're distracted by what were ultimately more jobs in retail with low wages and low benefits than the jobs that we had displaced in manufacturing. But it's not too late. Because of you folks out there, I think of you as the Black Knight from Monty Python, Holy Grail. Arms and legs lopped off, blood spurting out, and it's just a scratch because you're bloody but unbound. And we see that your contribution to the state gross product remains strong and vibrant. We see that there's an important multiplier between the dollars that you generate and the ripple through the rest of the economy. We understand that one job in manufacturing triggers another 4 in the private sector. John alluded to the fact that if you had 250,000 manufacturing jobs, you have another 1 million in the private sector. And we recognize that it's an anchor for so much of the rest of the industry that chains and connects to that. That manufacturing attracts R&D, R&D attracts corporate headquarters, and it ripples out in terms of the services. Now you have a generator for a service economy because you have something that genuinely needs to be served. The good news is we began to wake up, and hopefully not too late. In 2008, the new administration put together a draft master plan for state development and redevelopment, and they actually cited advanced manufacturing as one of the key sectors for growth of the economy. Hallelujah. I might argue that advanced manufacturing drives all of the other sectors that they cite. Biopharmaceutical, for example, high technology, even transportation and logistics. But it took so long to get us recognized as important. Who's going to equip it? And so what they cited was advanced manufacturing, and have identified these sub-industries or sub-codes based on NAICS codes that represent what they believe to be the core contributors to advanced manufacturing. So how's that played out for us? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. I think what's important to see is, again, you guys keep producing. Right? The productivity that we are getting from both the advanced and the so-called non-advanced manufacturing sector continues to grow. And that's an important message, because that's why you're in business. If we think that manufacturing needs to succumb to low-wage offshore competition, we're kidding ourselves. And if you haven't, please take a trip to China and look in their manufacturing facilities. You're not going to see what we perceive or believe, sweatshops with people cheek to jowl getting 10 cents an hour. You're going to see highly efficient, highly automated operations, and not a lot of people running around. Maybe that's how they started, but they were smart enough to reinvest that back into modernizing their manufacturing capacity. And the people we have here in New Jersey, they got that message a long time ago, and they've built. But it's not all good news for us, because the rest of the country has gotten it better than we've gotten. Manufacturing, in fact, led the recovery from the 2008 banking collapse. And you can see by those numbers, the blue lines are the rest of the U.S., and they continue to grow from there. While we have adopted the message, perhaps we haven't embraced the message, because our contribution and our growth has continued to decline. And we are one of only 5 states, Connecticut, Louisiana, New Jersey, New Mexico, and Vermont, one of only 5 states in the country whose manufacturing output has declined since 2008. So maybe part of the problem still is perceptions, one of which is that advanced manufacturing is about what you make. I would argue it ain't what you do, it's the way what you do it. It's the processes by which you make things that make you advanced. And so clearly those are all NAICS codes that correspond to advanced products, but perhaps more importantly, whether you're making plastic bags, kids' toys, or next generation GPS technology, if you're in business here in the United States, you're in business because you've adopted and embraced advanced equipment, robotics, automation, advanced sensor technology, advanced practices like lean manufacturing, IT-driven and well-connected, because in fact manufacturing is a supply chain game. A supply chain game that has always existed perhaps in automotive as an example, but we're seeing even pharmaceutical. Perhaps the last bastion of vertical integration has split and now has R&D outsourced, contract research organizations doing clinical trials and developing perhaps prototype stage or pilot stage quantities of their drugs, contract manufacturers, and the OEMs are really the last step of bringing things to market. And so, we have an opportunity to embrace that change. But part of the problem may be that we still think that manufacturing looks like this, that it stood still, and that each of those advanced product sectors are being made by 1940s and 1950s technologies. What we need to understand is, in fact, we've come a long way, baby, and that all of those products are made in environments that should be attractive, that are clean, and are the kind of jobs that I would be proud to have my children work with. And so where could this take us? We are at a crossroads. Can't see perhaps in the back we have the ghost of Christmas future. If we don't heed the path here and we continue down this road, we'll continue to see hollowing out. It's an economic development phrase that says that as big companies become more and more globally dominant and they push their operations to feed their customer base across the world, they become potentially less and less dependent on their original location. And clearly, we've seen that happen, industry after industry here, and perhaps it won't be long before our last anchor tenant, the global pharma companies, come to the same conclusion. Without production here, without a supply chain, without R&D necessarily here, because R&D wants to be close to production. And I can assure you there's a revolution coming in pharmaceuticals and in drugs that will require new manufacturing technologies, something that we are trying to embrace here as a state. Systematically, we'll begin to see those flow out. Just look at what was across the street. It's the Jets now, right? But what was it? It was Exxon Research and Engineering. And why was it here? Because their refinery was in Linden. When they closed down their refinery operations and moved them down to the Gulf Coast, it wasn't long before Exxon Chemical trailed the production, the plastics research went down there, and on and on and on until it was just as easy to move R&D down to warmer climes in Virginia than it was to keep it here. You can't repeat that process. We've spent 2 decades building the port of Newark to be the singular deep-water port for the eastern seaboard. Raised up the Bayonne Bridge at the last minute so the ships could pass under. Well, why would we want to bring that shipping in or ship out from Newark if in fact we've allowed the manufacturing to creep down to Georgia, the Carolinas, to Tennessee, Kentucky? Norfolk is just as suitable as a deep water port. Or maybe it'll creep up to Massachusetts. It's investing heavily in growing its manufacturing base. And Nova Scotia will become a port of preference. And so we can't afford to let that engine of our economy disappear. If we continue at the rate of erosion of jobs in manufacturing, productivity will always explain part of the decline in jobs, but we need to build more of these businesses. So if we take the trajectory we're on now, we'll be losing 10,000 per year. And as I said earlier, that multiplier will cost us another 40,000 jobs in the economy. And last, out-migration. We all know that New Jersey leads the country in a sorry statistic, net out-migration of college-age students. 30,000 more students leave than come into the state. California sends out more than us, but they bring in more than they send out. And so if we don't see attractive jobs and vibrant careers in manufacturing, in R&D, in the companies that make things and ship them to the world, how will we keep our children here to become part of the economy of the future? Very, very grim perhaps, right? But just like in Scrooge, there's redemption. And so if we see the light and recognize The manufacturing is going through a transition. We began because of natural resources, the Great Falls, the iron ore, and a country that was able to transform its cotton into woven goods. We then moved in an era where we took advantage of the high density of workforce. The greater New York area gave us the wealth and power of people to work in those factories. We're now in an era where its brain power is going to drive manufacturing. And what better place to do it than the place that has the highest density of scientists and engineers anywhere in the world? And if we can mine that, and mine all the other great assets that have kept you manufacturers alive, perhaps, like Scrooge, there is redemption. And that we'll see OEMs who are already anxious to reshore manufacturing and bring it back to the United States will again believe that New Jersey is the right place to do that. And that will build supply chains. In fact, not just supply chains, but the new model is innovation chains. That OEMs are now increasingly dependent on their suppliers to be part of the inventive process, and proximity makes a difference. It's difficult to pull teams together on video teleconferences across 7 different time zones. There really is an advantage to developing regional clusters. It's been proven, and we need to remember that and regrow that here. Manufacturing requires advanced equipment now. Just like we became the equipment supplier to the silk mills and built the industrial machinery age around that. This new generation of advanced equipment that blends in automation, advanced sensor technology, and software technology can also grow, and so we have the sister industries that go along with the end product industries. And if we can do that, we can now have our gross state product match those like Alaska, Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina, and many others that are growing as much as 20% in their manufacturing sector. In the process, we could create 250,000 new jobs, which are already proven to have a 64% wage premium over the rest of the jobs in the economy, and perhaps another 1 million direct jobs. That's not a bad future. It's as good as saving Tiny Tim. And I think that if we can do that, perhaps it'll be time to finally change the slogan on our license plate to what it always should have been. The Garden State is nice, but the Maker State is what we really all are. And I hope we can begin that and begin the journey to go back to that again. Thank you all.